Good morning, everyone. It's 8:30. I'll go ahead and call today's meeting, the Tuesday, November 29th meeting of the Clay County Board of Commissioners to order. The first item on the agenda today is an approval of the agenda.
Move approval?
A motion to approve the agenda from Commissioner Kaylee, a second from Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Today, we'd also like to recognize a donation in the amount of $8,000 from the Dilworth Firemen's Relief Association. This donation has been made in memory of Sheriff Bill Berquist, who is the longtime DARE educator in our county. Just grateful for the support of the Dilworth Firemen's Relief Association for that, with the purpose of the donation going to support the Clay County Sheriff's Office DARE programs in the Dilworth, Glen and Felton School District and Ulen Hitterdal School District. Citizens to be heard today. Is there anyone in the audience that's wishing to address the county board on any item that is not on the agenda? Any citizen wishing to be heard? Steve, have we had any requests to speak?
We have not, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The next item today is the approval of the payment of bills and vouchers.
Move to approve.
A motion offered from Commissioner Gross to approve the payment of bills and vouchers, a second from Commissioner Ebbinger. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Today, we have the minutes in the packet from the November 15th, 2022 board meeting. Board wishes.
Move approval.
A motion to approve the minutes as presented from Commissioner Campbell.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Item 2 today is a request to fill a vacancy for an overnight juvenile worker position. We have our juvenile director, James O'Donnell, with us today. Good morning, James.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here today to request permission to refill an overnight position we have in our secure unit. It's in our 2022 budget and 2023's budget. It's a critical position. Request backfill in the event of any hiring, wherever the hiring falls out.
And you'd like this effective immediately? This person's gone already?
This person is gone in next week.
Okay, all right.
Move to approve the request with backfill.
Motion to approve the request with backfill from Commissioner Gross, a second from Commissioner Ebbinger. Further discussion. Commissioner Kaylee.
How many open positions will you have after this one?
We have about two full-time, one left full-time position after this one. Variable hour, we're hurting with our part-time staff, especially part-time males. We could probably use about 40 of them, so.
Sounds like there's good jobs available with good benefits, if anyone's interested. Thanks, James.
Any further discussion?
Just a follow-up to that, thank you, Madam Chair. How has that improved somewhat? It wasn't too long ago, you were quite a few down, weren't you?
It has improved, just sheer applications aren't coming in, particularly males. Traditionally, we had a lot of, I would say, males that were maybe seeking maybe law enforcement type jobs in the future, or probation type jobs in the future. Our variable hour setup that we have is we can take somebody with very little to no history, and we can train them and use them in minor, variable hour substitute type of roles. The males aren't coming into the field anymore. We're getting a lot of our female population still coming in, those going after social services types of jobs. They'll be looking in those fields, but the male population is not applying for these positions anymore, particularly college-age kids.
Do you know some of the reasons for that?
I just maybe societal push, I guess. Maybe nobody wants to
I
go in that field anymore.
didn't know if there's multiple reasons, if it was compensation. I don't know.
There would be a little bit of compensation. It does matter. And, that is in my 2023 budget to increase that. But it's hit and miss with compensation because these are variable hour positions and they have the ability to pick up shifts. And we frequently have shifts available to pick up. And if it was about money and compensation, an individual that's looking for money would jump all over those open shifts, and that's not happening all that much, which would leave our full-time staff to get overtime to pick those up.
And then one final question. So your variable hour, the numbers that you've had to be able to draw from, has that gone down considerably?
It's gone down just crazy, yeah. We've had those positions open on an ongoing basis for about 2 years now, almost 2 years, that we close it and then open it back up again. We're looking for variable hour males.
Now, I'm just going to what Commissioner Cayley said too about, I think it's an opportunity for somebody who might just want something and is willing to just be there and, for a short shift or something too.
Yeah, it's very flexible.
Commissioner Ebinger.
Yeah, entry level on this is 18 years of age.
We try to get 21.
20, you want
At
at
21.
21.
21, yes.
Okay. That's still, and I'm thinking back of all the applications for law enforcement officers that I reviewed over the years, and so many of them around here got their start in juvenile. That's a good grounding. It's one of those positions where it gives no matter where you go, whether it be probation or enforcement, having a good grounding in juvenile corrections and in corrections, for that matter, is a great way to get into the field. Unfortunately, as we see, law enforcement's not getting the applications either. So, I think the concerns are going to pass, but the need for the positions and the quality of the pay and the benefits and the training in Clay County should outweigh that. This is something that really young men and women need to look at and consider as a career move. So I hope we can start getting more applicants in there with the quality that we've had that makes your facility what it is, which is one that they talk about all over the state.
The variable hour position we have is a great stepping stone. You learn verbal de-escalation every day verbal de-escalation. So it's awesome to learn some skills.
Yeah, I hope some young people start giving that consideration. We are reaching out to the criminal justice programs.
Yep.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the item? There's a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Your second item today, James.
I'm requesting to fill a position in our non-secure unit. This is a day, evening, AM, PM, rotating with some weekends. This individual isn't with us right now. We're looking to fill this one as soon as possible. It's in our 2022's budget and 2023's budget. That's really about all I have to say. Look for backfill if that falls that way.
Thank you, James. Commissioner Campbell.
Move approval with backfill.
Motion to approve the request with backfill from Commissioner
Second.
Campbell, a second from Commissioner Cayley. Any further discussion? Commissioner Cayley.
This one, it wasn't clear on the memo. Is this full-time or variable hour?
No, this is full-time staff with benefits.
That's what I assumed. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you, James. Thanks for what you're doing over there as well.
Thank you.
Item 4 today is a request ARPA funding to address rental operation needs in the mental health program of A Place for Hope. Our director, Steve Larson, and Social Service Director, Rhonda Porter, will pitch this for today.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Bringing this forward on behalf of the ARPA Funding Committee. This past week, we heard a request from Daryl Vasvik, the Executive Director of A Place for Hope. He had recently received an increase in the cost of his rent of $1,000 per month, which would make providing the wellness, mental health supports a challenge for him. You may recall earlier through the ARPA process, Mr. Vasvik is also involved in a food shelf. We did provide some funding for that program also, but just want to verify that this is something different. It falls within the mental health component, the challenges that we've seen that have been brought about by COVID. And so the committee felt it was worth looking at. The committee did address whether or not there are some other participants that Daryl's involved in, and maybe Rhonda can touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So the shortfall.
Turn your mic on, Rhonda.
Rhonda, can you please? Thank you.
There we go. The shortfall A Place for Hope was having was $12,000. And he had approached the Adult Mental Health Initiative, our BCOW Adult Mental Health Initiative, because he does receive some funding from them already. They did have some underspending in 2022 in the amount of $3,000, so they did allocate that to A Place for Hope for rent in 2023. In addition to that, Daryl reviewed his budget and was able to reallocate an additional $3,000, so that would take $6,000 of the 12. And so therefore, the request to the ARPA committee is for $6,000.
And the ARPA committee did talk about this, and I believe A Place for Hope had not seen a rent increase for a significant amount of time, and then when approached, it was a very large increase, and difficult to just spur of the moment come up with that. And the services that A Place for Hope provide within our community are so vital to that group of people. We really wanted to make sure that there was some stability in what that would be. The increase came on so suddenly, it's really difficult to really find anything locally that could, a space that could fit that need. In the future, trying to find sustainable funds for this program, working with BCAL for an additional allocation of what the rent needs would be. Commissioner Campbell, did you have anything?
Yeah, just to follow up on our ARPA discussion, and you know, the longer-term concern is the sustainability of those increases and with what they have for a budget. So hopefully, you know, I'm thankful that BCAL did step up and assist in that matter. Our ARPA funds run out at some point in time, and so yeah, and I agree. It certainly is something that's needed. It's just a matter of finding the sustainability of it. So.
Rhonda, can you talk a little bit about what this area of A Place for Hope, the service it does provide, because it is different than the food shelf component?
Sure. And as I mentioned to the ARPA committee, under the Adult Mental Health Act and the county being that authority, we do have some obligations to assure an array of mental health services for our adults in our community that have significant mental health needs. And this is one of those areas. You may recall that we have, the county, you've approved funding for A Place for Hope over the years, ever since I can remember. And in 2023, we do have allocated $53,401 for A Place for Hope, and it really is for the operational costs. Had I been aware of this issue sooner, probably could have done some addressing of it in the budgeting process, but it came up a little later, so we're trying to piece it together through 2023. But yes, they are, you know, maybe what you might refer to as a social club for folks with mental health. They can go there for supports, they schedule outings, they have mental health services and supports there. The food pantry has given some of those participants opportunities to volunteer in the food pantry as well, which has been very, very helpful for them to, that feeling of contribution and that ability to have activities throughout the day that can help others and help themselves as well. So it's definitely a needed program, and we want to make sure that it continues in our community.
Thank you, Rhonda. Any questions from the board? Commissioner Kaylee?
Just a comment, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago when I reported on that rent increase for them, but the folks that rent or lease the building to A Place for Hope have been donating the space that they're using for the food pantry free of charge. And that's a tremendous, tremendous gift to the community. And so having that adjacent space for the mental health club activity side, and then being able to just walk across the hall and be involved in the food pantry there has been a real community builder. So thank you to that business owner for their contribution to this as well. That's significant.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any further discussion from the board?
Madam Chair, I would move the request of $6,000 of ARPA funds.
Second.
We have a motion to approve $6,000 in ARPA funding for the request noted from Commissioner Campbell, a second from Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you. Item 5 today is a request ARPA funding for the senior transportation service. We have Lori Schwartz from Community Action Lakes and Prairies, and Steve as well will discuss this.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Again, this request before you this morning comes from our ARPA fund. If you recall, I think CAPLP representatives are here about a year ago in looking for funding for their rural route senior transportation. This program provides a 12-passenger handicap accessible van that goes door to door for appointments, groceries, vaccinations, and basically keeping those citizens involved in our community during a pretty challenging time. Through this process, CAPLP has continued to look through additional funding, thank you, for the program, and continue to do so, and unfortunately at this point have not been successful. So the request before you this morning is to utilize $51,500 in ARPA funding to cover salary, benefits of a truck driver, fuel, insurance, and bus maintenance to continue the program into 2023 as CAPLP continues to look for additional funding.
Lori, do you have anything to add?
Good morning, everybody. I just want to thank you again. Yes, it was a year ago, December, that we were before you asking for additional funding to keep our rural route transportation service going. I don't want to share a pity party with you, but I feel that when we received the Live Well at Home grant from the state in 2018, and we were to start our services in 2019, we started with enough dollars to purchase a bus, to hire a bus driver, and an additional case manager for rural services. That was on top of Renee's work that we use other funding from Clay County and the Area on Aging for. And I feel that once we received that funding, it took about 4 months, I think, to get our bus. And during that time, we were advertising and looking for drivers, and we really ran into so many barriers. I think it's kind of all over finding a driver. We found a driver that was just getting the service up and running in Clay County, and COVID hit. So everything stopped. You're very well aware of that. Once we picked up services again, when COVID settled down a little bit, we were very limited to riders because of the social distancing. And then it was a year ago yesterday, we lost our bus driver to COVID. And again, I'm not saying that to get pity. It's just I feel there's been so many barriers to getting this up and running, but With the dollars that you approved last year, it took us some months to find a driver, but we did find one that started in June. And that has been, once again, getting that slowly up and running again, that has been going very well. The driver's doing a nice job. We are at a point now where COVID is, that we feel like we can do more outreach, and we could probably do kind of another soft launch of this service. And I just really appreciate the support that we get from Clay County for our Clay County rural seniors. We continue, as Steve said, to search for funding through the state, other local funding. And that has been, and that's something that we're going to continue to do. But again, as Steve said, we weren't successful in receiving our last Live Well at Home grant, which I hear is not uncommon for them to pause for a year or two. And then we found out just a few months ago that we did not receive the MARDAG grant that we had written for to continue this service.
Well, thank you. I know that we've had a lot of discussion about this, and this is a service that, as a commissioner that serves the rural area, I hear quite frequently is a vital need to our seniors in rural Clay County to have the option to coordinate with you, to get to their appointments safely. I'm hopeful that if the board approves this today, we can really work hard on that soft launch, have conversations with the Record Review and Holly Herald, and making sure that all of our senior centers within Clay County know of this, so that you can coordinate days of pickups. Maybe you're in Newland one day and somewhere else the next. And as that consistency comes, I think that's been the barrier. Having the consistency there, then folks can schedule their appointments. Those take a little time to schedule, but knowing that's available can schedule that out in coordination with when the days are available. Commissioner Campbell?
Thank you. So, Lori, the funds that you received from ARPA, the previous funds that you received, obviously things didn't work out, and so you weren't able to spend all of that money at that time, in that calendar year, right?
Right.
You started late?
We did. We started a little bit later, again, yes, because of searching for a driver. We have about $6,000 left of the dollars that you granted us last January.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, what is the total calendar cost to operate this particular function?
It is right around, last year, it was right around $70,000 a year. And I'm just thinking that, for 2023, we're maybe looking at $72,000, and that's for salary and benefits and bus maintenance, gasoline.
And so some of that leftover money would make up the difference between what you just said in this 51.5, or?
It would absolutely.
Not all of it, but.
Not all of it, but absolutely. Everything we do receive as a community action agency, we do receive a couple of small pots of money that are considered unrestricted that we can use to supplement certain programs and services, but that $6,000 additional will definitely help keep this going.
Well, we continue to hear that rural transportation is just a problem, and this is a small way to at least help alleviate that a little bit, so.
Commissioner Kaylee?
Yeah, as someone who serves on the Capital Board, I know that we've heard lots of phone calls of folks wanting the service back up and running when it wasn't. And it was created as a direct response to requests from our rural community. And so this is something that our residents need and want, and it is part of aging well at home, which is something that we definitely want to support. So.
Yes, Commissioner Gross.
Do you have any documentation how often it's being used? How many people did you provide services for?
Since we picked up service again in June, we've provided 76 rides. So it's right around, we started in July with 8, and then increased to 18, then 20, and just in November, we provided 17 rides.
And I think too that most people who live out where I live are not needing extra help really as much in the summer. It's when the weather is colder, the roads are terrible, it's more difficult to get around. I think that's when you see an increase in your usage as you did prior. Not saying that people don't need rides in the summer, but the climate is more of a barrier in fall and winter.
And if I could add to, when we wrote for the Live Well at Home grant, we wrote in the grant that we know that our seniors are so isolated. And so one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to provide this transportation was a lot for just social interaction and getting people out of their homes, whether that meant to go to Walmart or go to a thrift store together or go have pie and coffee together for seniors that have sat alone in their homes for so long. But what we've found, and the reason that we did that is because the need for getting people to medical appointments was being taken care of somewhat, not 100%. But what we've found is we have a lot of seniors that were not getting to their medical appointments or getting to the pharmacy. So we have picked up, I mean, absolutely, we would never turn that down. So we, I believe, have been doing more medical appointments and pharmacy services, immunizations than we had planned to, which is, again, if that's what's needed, you know, that's what we do.
Commissioner Ebinger?
I'm on the Dancing Skies Area of Aging Board, and across our region, rural Minnesota, this is one of the givens that you need to have. You look in Clay County and Cass County, they've got senior rides, great program. It takes care of the citizens in those areas, but the rural seniors are the ones you've really got to be concerned, or at least more concerned about. Because of the distance, the isolation, which is a good point. These are all things that this program will address. So, yeah, I strongly recommend, and I appreciate the ARPA committee for identifying this as a good use of those funds.
Any other comments?
How many does your bus hold? What, in terms of counts, is it
12 passengers.
12 passenger? So does that require a special license to?
Does not.
Okay.
No, right. And I don't know if you've seen the bus before. It's beautiful. It was a brand-new bus back in 2019. But the type of bus it is, and I'm not exactly sure why, if it has to do with weight or air brakes, but it doesn't require a CDL.
Have you ever talked with Rhonda or with people within our volunteer driver program that we have for other things in Clay County?
We have in the past. You know, we've been providing senior services, you know, in Clay County for many years, not necessarily transportation, but yes, in the volunteer, I think what we have found is we've just not, maybe 10 years ago, that would have worked much better, but what we've found now is that volunteerism is just not consistent enough. It was.
Yeah, I know some of the dilemmas involved with the volunteer driver program, and that has to do with a lot of them, they have appointments and they have to take them out of, you know, to Minneapolis or something like that, and then pretty soon the last minute they're canceled, and that frustrates the drivers. I guess I was thinking more from the standpoint about, from a budgetary standpoint in the future, would it be possible to be thinking about some of those folks to actually drive for you?
Oh, the bus.
Yes.
You're saying the bus.
Yes.
You know, that is something that I can say we have not discussed, to drive the actual bus. And I think, I think part of the reason, it's certainly up for discussion. I think what we would need, though, is a solid, maybe 3 or 4 volunteers that know, you know, all of the safety guidelines. And they'd have to have CPR and first aid, and they'd have to know how to do the bus inspection. because we're monitored, by the Department of Transportation.
Yep.
So do the inside and outside bus inspection, but, it's not out of the question at all if we can
I speak on behalf of the ones because I used to go to their annual celebration for all the volunteer drivers, and there's some really good people there
Yes, yeah.
that are highly skilled in many ways,
Yeah,
so.
yeah, absolutely. We would,
Right, thank you.
thank you.
Hey, really briefly, if someone watching the live stream in rural Clay County wants to get a hold of the service, where do they go?
They would call our bus driver, Lori, at 218-331-5601.
Great, thank you. So call Lori and get scheduled up if you'd like to utilize this service. Board wishes.
Move approval?
I have a motion offered from Commissioner Kaylee to approve the request of $51,500.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, I would note, we did have an update a number of weeks back on our ARPA funding, but I did provide a handout today that Darren has kept up during this process that shows where the funding has been allocated. He did add the two items on this information, and so you do have that updated information before you.
Great. We are scheduled for a public hearing at 9 o'clock, but, what?
Would it be possible, Madam
Yep,
Chair? if
that
we-
was-
Okay, sorry.
But we do have one more item that's a request for approval on the MnDOT limited use permit with the resolution 2022-37 for the Snowmobile Trail. We have Justin Sorum with us today, as well as Greg. Good morning to you both.
Good morning. Morning. So, like you said, I am here this morning to request approval of the MnDOT limited use permit 1401-0014, Amendment 1.1. So this LUP is an agreement between MnDOT and Clay County, and it will renew on 1/1/23 and continue through 2033. So the reason for this amendment is to utilize CASA 9 right-of-way from 80th Avenue South to Downer, because BNSF did not approve of using the right-of-way for this trail. So I guess just a little bit of background on this permit. It's been in place since 2002 and renews every 10 years unless there is an amendment to certain crossings or where the trail is utilized.
Okay.
And I guess if Greg wanted any, or had anything to add.
All right. Any questions from the board on this? There's two requests. The first would be the resolution 2022-37.
Move approval.
A motion offered from Commissioner Campbell to approve that resolution.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. The next would be to approve the MnDOT limited use permit number 1401-0014, Amendment 1.1.
Move to approve.
Motion offered from Commissioner Gross to approve.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate the work on that one. Okay, our public hearing. To consider adoption of zoning map and text amendments through passage of Ordinance 2022-5 to the Clay County Development Code and zoning map.
Move to open the hearing.
We have a motion from Commissioner Campbell to open the public hearing.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. And we have with us our Planning Director, Matthew Jacobson, as well as our Planning Commission Chair, Ezra Bear. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, so this is a request or proposal from Clay County to amend one of our zoning districts, the Resource Protection Aggregate Overlay Zoning District. This zoning district, the purpose of this overlay zoning district is to, I'll get to that actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So if you recall, back in May, we had a Clay County resident looking to do rezoning to remove this resource protection aggregate overlay zoning district from his property. He was like right basically in Downer. I was then, we looking closer at this particular their zoning district and noticing that it was in areas where you would never do gravel minings, like in Downer. Or in areas where we had incompatible zoning with gravel mining. For example, you can't do in Clay County any gravel mining in our wellhead protection areas, and we had this zoning district kind of overlaid over the top of zoning to protect ground or drinking water just east of Barnesville. And then also in Clay County in shoreland areas, we do not permit gravel mining as well, and yet in our shoreland zoning areas, we also had, in a lot of areas, had this this resource protection aggregate overlay zoning district. So the kind of the intent of this is to kind of clean this zoning district up and to remove some undue burdens and restrictions on landowners who might have property that are within this zoning district where gravel mining wouldn't even be permitted in the first place. The Planning Commission did create a subcommittee to look at this in detail, and then through that process, they were also looking at our county use table. And the county use table is essentially a big table in the code that has all of our zoning districts in the county. And then it has different residential, commercial, public, accessory uses that are permitted or not permitted in certain zoning districts. They were looking at the uses that were either permitted or not permitted in this resource protection aggregate overlay zoning district, and decided that there are some additional uses that could be permitted that wouldn't be incompatible with gravel mining. And so just to give you just a little bit of background and the public a little bit of background on this specific zoning district, the Resource Protection Aggregate Overlay District, it was designed, it was in the mid-2000s, 2006-07, I believe. The intent of it is to protect areas that have been identified as having the potential for significant aggregate resources, and to protect them from incompatible development and to protect them from overdevelopment. I think the biggest, or the kind of the classic example would be a residential subdivision. So in this zoning district, the county does not permit residential subdivisions. And I think the purpose of that is if you look in other areas of the state where there's been residential development, that's locked up a lot of gravel resources. And so, and they will never be able to be accessed again. And so the purpose is to protect those resources from those types of development, so we can continue to have access to them and continue to keep costs as low as possible and have as much of that resource as available in our local and regional markets. And so this was done, how this zoning district was kind of delineated. It was based off of the Clay County Aggregate Resources Inventory. And this is a study that was done in the eastern part of Clay County by the Minnesota DNR. They have an aggregate mapping project. They're trying to do every single county in the state. And we're one of the counties that's fortunate enough that we have this available to us. And they use a lot of different sources of information, and including some field work as well, to identify areas where there is a high potential for sand and gravel resources. And so based on this map is kind of how that zoning district was created. And so you can kind of see the similarities here. Areas where there's for sure gravel, where the potential's high and moderate and slight, those are the areas that kind of fell into or became this resource protection aggregate overlay zoning district. You can see too that a lot of our gravel pits in the county are in these areas. And this just kind of shows the active and inactive gravel pits in Clay County as of 2021. So with our new comprehensive plan goals and objectives, I think the county has identified aggregate resources as important to Clay County and the region. And we have set goals and objectives to continue to protect quality aggregate resources from incompatible residential, commercial, industrial development, and to implement policies and standards to ensure the sound stewardship of aggregate resources. And then also fostering a balanced approach to aggregate resource extraction that is compatible with the natural resources and rural character of Clay County as well. And so, as I had kind of mentioned earlier, we do have this zoning district in areas where gravel mining is prohibited, and just specifically, it's all shoreland zoning districts, and then our resource protection wellhead protection overlay zoning district, and then the agricultural service center zoning district. And so, an example of the agricultural service center zoning district being Downer, for example. And because it's not allowed in those zoning districts, we're proposing to remove this overlay from those areas. So I think it's really important that just to underscore why we're doing this is not to make zoning more restrictive in Clay County, not to tighten the land uses in this zoning district. It's to really remove kind of this this zoning district from areas in the county where it's not really necessary, where it might already be incompatible with the underlying base zoning, and to remove kind of those undue and hardships and burdens from landowners who are in these areas. And as I had mentioned, we're looking at the list of permitted uses as well. I'll give an example of one here. So it's kind of hard to see, but so currently, as it stands in our Clay County use table, which is in the Clay County Land Development Code, in the Resource Protection Aggregate Overlay Zoning District, if you have an animal feed lot or a poultry lot of 50 or more animal units of livestock or poultry, you can have a feed lot as a conditional use in this zoning district. However, if you are a commercial agricultural operation raising less than 50 animal units, it currently, as it stands, it's not permitted. So that doesn't really make any sense. So when the subcommittee and the planning commission, we were looking at this, we were like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. That should be a permitted use if we're going to allow commercial operations of 50 or more animal units. So things like that are what we're proposing to change, some of those inconsistencies. And then also just adding some additional recreational, public and private uses, campgrounds, golf course, park, picnic ground, that are currently not permitted, that could be permitted, would also be potentially really good uses for pits once they are abandoned or reclaimed as well. So looking at the data for this proposal, currently there's about 1,500 parcels that are zoned resource protection aggregate. That's about 18.2% of the county. With this proposed rezoning, 770 parcels would be impacted, so that's about 2.3% of the county. And then the parcels that would remain in this resource protection aggregate zoning would be about 1,228, so about, again, 15.9% of the county. Of those 770, it's not that we're proposing to remove the zoning totally from these parcels. Some of these parcels, they'll be partially removed. So there might be an area where you have a parcel has some shoreland zoning and this zoning as well. So we would remove it from the shoreland areas. The Planning Commission did go through a finding of fact and order as prescribed by our development code, and they had affirmative findings for each of the criteria listed here. Looking at the effective use, looking at the impact of the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of occupants in the county, looking at potential burden on public utilities and related to the overall needs of the county and to the existing land use, looking at consistency with the ordinance, any conflicts with the comprehensive plan, and if this proposed rezoning and then our text amendments in the use table would prematurely stimulate public investment in public utilities. And all of the findings that they made in that case were of the affirmative. And so at their meeting, which was in November 15th, the Planning Commission did vote unanimously to recommend approval of these amendments to the zoning map, as well as to the proposed changes to the permitted uses in this zoning district. Any questions for me at all?
Any questions for Matt on the presentation? Any questions? Ezra, do you have anything else to add?
During that public hearing on November 15th, this room was pretty full, and once we explained it all, everybody pretty much understood what was happening, so I think most of the residents were okay with it. Once they were informed on what was actually happening and not what they thought was going to happen, because we sent over 2,000 notices, so that's a lot of notices. So a lot of people got a little riled up, but once they figured out what was happening, I think everybody left here pretty on board with it.
I think the important to note is that this is an action that is still, excuse me, has the intent of protecting the resources. That's a very large piece. The second is to clear up conflicts in what is allowed and what is not allowed for landowners. And secondly, or thirdly, there's still shoreland protection overlays. And a lot of the questions from folks in the audience that evening came from people that lived in Lakes area, Lake 15, that were concerned that, you know, here I'm here, is somebody going to open up a gravel mine on the top of the hill next to me? Well, that's still within the overlay, and there's still some concerns with shoreland runoff and the water protection piece, so that still is a protection in place with that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just can highlight too on a map here a couple of the areas just so we can kind of see maybe what might warrant some of these changes. It's better to kind of maybe see a visual of why we are kind of proposing to do this. One example is down in Downer. Getting there. So you can see kind of here the orange color is the current zoning, the current resource protection aggregate zoning, and the green is the proposed. So if you don't see green, and only see orange, we're proposing to remove that from this zoning district. You can see like Downer, the whole eastern and northern side of Downer has been zoned resource protection aggregate. And so that would limit people who live in Downer. They wouldn't be permitted to do certain things with their property that would be pretty typical of a residential property in an area, kind of a town or a village like a Downer. Another example would be if we were to go over to the southeast part of the county and look at like a Turtle Lake, for example. So Turtle Lake, you have a lot of residential development along Turtle Lake, and currently, as it stands right now, it is also in this resource protection aggregate zoning district. Would probably never open up a gravel mine right off of Turtle Lake Road. So those are just kind of some areas where, you know, if someone had come in and they wanted to request to do like a farm building or something like that, right now, as it stands in our code, you can't do that in our resource protection aggregate overlay. Another example is the Planning Commission recently heard a request for a platted subdivision in a shoreland area that also had this aggregate overlay on it. And that landowner had also gone through the process to remove that overlay this summer, and that was heard by you all as well, so they could proceed with that, because that's something that's permitted in a shoreland area.
Okay. Anything else? If not, we have several members of the public wishing to speak. Any questions before we do that? Okay. All right, public, if you'd like to address the board, feel free to go up to the podium, state your name and address, please, and we'd love to hear your comments and questions.
Hello, my name is Linda Berg, and we live out there in the Riverton section, and the gravel pit is just a little east and north of us. Now, does Aggregate have any restrictions on how deep they can drill or drain water from their pit?
Are you, so Riverton, are you talking, is that pit 21?
What is a pit 21, yes.
Okay. It's pit specific question, but Matt, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so this public hearing is really just about changes to this specific zoning district, and we're not really focused on any specific gravel pits with this public hearing. What I can say, though, about this particular pit is there has been some concerns over the years with discharge from this pit downstream. It kind of follows roughly kind of this wetland complex and eventually to the Buffalo River. And one of the concerns with this pit is just potentially just excess flooding and impacts to the groundwater levels. This pit's been around for a long time. It's grandfathered in. They don't have any permits from the county just because it precedes our permitting process. Groundwater or any water withdrawals and any water discharge is regulated by the state of Minnesota. So the DNR would require, and they do hold a groundwater appropriations permit from the DNR. And also the DNR does regulate the discharge that happens from this pit. And then in terms of what the quality of the DNR's focused on the water quantity. In terms of water quality, this pit, they do have a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit, an MPDES permit, and that is regulated by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And so really the regulatory authority for water would be the state of Minnesota on this pit.
So Linda, I know that it was a roundabout way of not answering your question, but we gave you a lot of information to find the answer to the question. But Matt, do you think you can work with Linda offline about who to contact specifically if you have concerns about
State of Minnesota, yeah, and the
Absolutely.
who the contact is there? Because it
absolutely.
doesn't necessarily fall within what we're covering in this public hearing, but I think it's information that's helpful for you.
Yep.
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
Commissioner Campbell.
You know, her questions might not pertain to this particular pit, but it could pertain to something in the future.
Yes.
And so the question then becomes, if we remove some of these protection areas, there still is a process in place that before a permit can be had. And that would go through the Planning Commission. And concerns such as water runoff and all those things on newly established gravel pits would be, that all of those things would be considered in order of granting a new permit.
And even with existing permits, those components are in there. The problem
As
with this,
conditions.
with this particular one is it precedes that.
Yeah, it's grandfathered in, and there's really no recourse that we have other than, just because something is grandfathered in, it doesn't give you the right to, contaminate everything either. So, but that's the proper agencies he just talked about are the ones who control that.
Okay, so none of these permits were gotten through Clay County? The state has complete control over?
On this specific, if there's many other pits, so if there's another pit that we have concerns about, we can look at that outside of this hearing to see if it covers our permitting authority.
We've lived there more than 50 years, and our sump pump runs year-round after they started putting in drain tile, coming down the hill, pumping year-round, even in the wintertime. And when Albright was part of the commission, he was out there and heard the pumps running in the winter months. So they drain year-round, whether they're mining or not.
Yeah, I think we can work to reach out to Minnesota, state of Minnesota and DNR on that piece.
Yep, absolutely, Madam Chair. Happy to do that and connect you with the folks at the state. I can also say that we, as a county, have had the opportunity to provide comments on these permits, and I had an opportunity last year to provide comments on these permits, and the comments that I provided were there are landowner concerns with the runoff coming from the discharge from this pit that need to be looked at and addressed. And I do believe that there was a study that was done by Houston Engineering looking at the hydrology impacts from this particular pit as well, that I can make available to you all if you're interested. And I can also, I believe I can make it available. I can request to see if I can make it available to any member of the public as well.
And I think that's important, just, people that maybe don't understand the hydrology, sump pumps in the valley obviously run. I live in the bottom of the valley and it is dry and my sump pump's not running. And there are seasons of sump pumps needing to run, and I think if we're seeing that they're consistently going year-round, it deserves an additional look.
Then last year, they put in drain tile coming down the hill, so there's more water coming now than what was pumped previously.
Okay.
Now, do they need to get a permit to put in drain tile on that after it's been established? Would that have to come through Clay County or the state too?
I believe, my understanding is that would come through the state for a drain tile system, and possibly also the Buffalo Red River Watershed District as well.
That's probably where the name Albright came up.
Yeah,
Bruce was
because
with
we
the-
went to the watershed meetings over the years.
Yes. Yeah.
And obviously, we've gotten just lip service, so they had said that things would be changed, but so far nothing has, except that aggregate is, spread out. And
All right, well, let's make some contacts in working with Linda on that. Thank you for being here today.
thank you.
Additional comments from the public? Any additional questions, clarification? Anyone else? Anyone online today? Oh, here you are. Good morning, sir.
Yeah, I'm Richard Berg, I'm Linda's husband. But another thing that concerns me, and I've called the county, the watershed, the whole works, is the water runs across our property to the west, and when it fills up there, it comes back to the tree line and comes in from the west into my property, and that's fine. But like I told the county, my septic system and everything is on the west side of my house, my drain field, everything, and I'm afraid that water's gonna keep coming in from the west, and it's gonna run that water and septic into my drain tile on my house. And I was after the watershed and the county about that, when the aggregate started draining this water. That's up, I don't want my drain field.
Richard, I was out with Bruce Albright maybe 4 years ago looking at that, but I think now that there's some new leadership and additional people on the watershed, I know Paul Krabnoff's on the watershed for another month. Let's make sure we bring that up to, and maybe relook at it. Okay?
So I don't know, just, I've met many times with Bruce, but everything just went all to heck after, he retired. Aggregate's draining more now than he ever did. When you start putting 36-inch culverts in the ground draining, that's a lot of water.
Yeah,
Our water is snow, go up the road a half a mile from me, melts the snow and the ice in the ditch in the wintertime. When it's 20 below zero, don't tell me it ain't something running.
well, thank you for mentioning that, and I think it's something that does need, even though this is something that's grandfathered, the county can certainly try to assist in getting all the right people connected. And I sometimes we like to volunteer the services of our staff, even on, so I'm suggesting maybe, Matt, that this issue be brought before the Buffer Red Watershed District too. I know Paul's back there kind of nodding affirmatively, but I just think that maybe on behalf of our citizens, we can just go forward and we don't want to make this problem any worse. And this, by the way, I don't think what we're doing today would make anything worse in this particular case. So that is something separate. But I think if we can help in some ways, I know what it's like when you get water inundated on septic systems and that type of thing, and it just, that makes for difficult living. So, yeah. So I do have some other comments if I can, and I think Matt, early on in his presentation, he mentioned that we implemented this in the early 2000s. And I happened to be on the board at that time, and one of the things that we heard time and time again, for example, when we go to our AMC conferences, that's Association of Minnesota Counties, and we get an opportunity to hear from other commissioners in other parts of the state, and the concerns about when it comes to aggregate and the protection of the resources that we have. There's a lot of places in this state where they made some bad decisions in terms of development over those areas. And when we, as a former township official, township roads are the most important thing there is to everybody's way of life. You have to have those, and how are township roads maintained? They're maintained with gravel resources. So we have to have them. And some of these places in some of these metropolitan areas or suburbs in these metropolitan areas, they've made the mistake of developing over them, and now the cost to maintain their roads skyrockets because they have to bring it in from so much further away. And that's something that we don't want to see happen here in Clay County. We want to protect our resources. Unfortunately, I would like to have something where we can't just load these trucks and have them go over to the across the river, either into North Dakota, but that's something that's difficult for us to be able to do. So the gravel resource district is important. I agree with this 100%. I also have seen where we go in and we make these overlay districts, and we find out later they're inappropriate. And so you do what you can to clean them up. And I think the Planning Commission, thank your Planning Commission. I want to say these things aren't easy to do. Like I said, you had a full room here, and once people got to figure out what you're doing, I think they are probably more keen on it. But I really think that we need to allow our landowners to have some individual rights too that can't be taken away because of a overlay district that, if you want to build a barn and you can't because it's a overlay district, it makes no sense.
Any other comments from anyone on the hearing? Any other comments? Last chance. Any other comments? Board?
Move to close public hearing?
We have a motion from Commissioner Kaylee to close the public hearing.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Ebbinger. Any further discussion? Commissioner Kaylee.
I just want to echo the thanks to everyone that worked on this. This was a big project. A lot of details to look at with all of those usage charts and different land areas. And thank you to everyone who worked on this.
All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Do we need to go through the findings of fact? Okay, all right.
I do think
Madam Chair, before you go on, I think Matt should go down, Matt. You have ordinance 2022-3, and in the packet's 2022-5. So I think you just have to clarify the ordinance number to make sure we have the right number. It is 5?
Yep, it is 5.
Okay. In granting a zoning district amendment, the Board of Commissioners shall consider the effect of the proposed use upon the health, safety, morals, and general welfare of occupants of surrounding lands, existing and anticipated land usage, traffic conditions, including parking facilities on adjacent streets and land, and the effect on agricultural usage and values of property and scenic view in the surrounding areas, and the effect of the proposed use on existing comprehensive plans. Number 2, the burden on public utilities. The development authorized by the rezoning will not create an excessive burden on any public facilities or utilities which serve and/or are proposed to serve the area. Related to overall needs, the rezoning is reasonably related to the overall needs of the county and to the existing land use. Number 4, consistency with ordinance. The rezoning is consistent with the purposes of this ordinance and the purposes of the zoning district in which the applicant seeks classification. The conflict with comprehensive plan. The rezoning is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan of any township or city of the county or the county land use plan. 6, prematurely stimulate public investment in utilities. The rezoning will not either individually or cumulatively stimulate prematurely public investment in the facilities and utilities described in subsection D.2.A of this section. Six? Is that it? All right.
Madam Chair, I move the findings of fact.
Second.
So is that the ordinance or the finding of fact?
Findings of fact first, I think.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the findings of fact from Commissioner Campbell, a second from Commissioner Cayley. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. The next item is ordinance 2022-5.
Madam Chair, I move ordinance number 2022-5.
We have a motion to approve ordinance 2022-5 from Commissioner Campbell.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Matt, I also want to echo thank you to the department for the work on getting this to us, and Ezra as well, to the Planning Commission, but even more specifically to the public. We've had a lot of public input throughout this process, not only at the Planning Commission and subcommittee level, but now today to the folks that came to this meeting. It's imperative that we continue to hear from our residents on these items, certainly to clear up any item that may cause frustration, but also to facilitate the whole needs of the county. Anything else? All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And you're welcome to stay throughout the rest of the meeting if you need a good nap, but you don't have to. Okay, item 8 today is the information and consideration of further participation in a water study. We have Keith Burnt with us online, I believe, the Norman County engineer, Sarah Sesselman from AE2S, and Keith, I believe you have another member of your team, but you're welcome to pitch it if you'd like.
Okay, well, thank you. And good morning, Chair Mongeau and Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. For any that don't know me, my name is Keith Burnt. I'm the Norman County engineer. And as the chair mentioned, I also have Sarah Sisselman here with me from AE2S and Danielle Marks from the law firm of Flaherty and Hood. So in recent years, in both in Norman, Polk, and Clay counties, rural communities and rural residents have experienced severe conditions with drinking water, including arsenic contamination, infrastructure failures, and these ongoing looming concerns about many of the older systems are outdated and in need of replacement or upgrades, and oftentimes it seems unaffordable for some of the rural communities. So Norman County has been working in the past year or so with a group looking at the potential of forming a rural water district. And so some months ago, the county board contracted with Flaherty and Hood to provide some legal guidance regarding how that process might look to form a rural water district. So with that introduction, I'd like to turn things over this morning first to Sarah to provide some background on the project and the process, and then to Daniel to talk about the process moving forward should your board choose to be a part of a water district.
Thank
So,
you.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Keith, I just have one clarification just for anyone watching in reference to the county entering a legal partnership. That was Norman County.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want to clarify for anyone watching. All right, Sarah.
Thanks, Keith, and good morning, commissioners, and thank you for having us today. Just because I can't see you guys, I can't see the familiar faces, but back in January of 2022, Lucas Spaeth, who is from Halstead, and myself attended one of the ARPA committee meetings, and at that meeting we presented really at that time what was still in very much idea form of what this rural water district would do for the region, who it could potentially serve. And then at that time, we had also given information on really who had basically told us that, oh my gosh, we're on board with something like this would be great. So the way that this whole idea really came together actually started with the city of Climax up there in Polk County, having very serious arsenic contamination issues. We're actually having the ribbon cutting for them to be switching over to their new water supply next Monday. So kind of exciting timing. But aside from Climax, all the way down Highway 75 down to Georgetown, and also including Felton, we received a resolution of support or a letter of support from each of the cities along Highway 75. And what those resolutions and letters of support were describing was that, basically each community was acknowledging that we too have, challenges with our water infrastructure or water quality. We all understand that, in a smaller community, building a new water tower for $3 million is a huge burden, or a new water treatment facility is a huge burden for a small number of people. And so that's where we really started to look at this more regional concept of forming a rural water district, which is very much the same principle as north of here is Marshall Polk Rural Water. South of here, we've got Red Rock Rural Water, and a couple other Southwest Minnesota rural water districts. Biggest benefit of rural water district is long-term, high quality, safe water, potable water supply, where you effectively the economies of scale allow us to everybody to share in the cost of the capital and operation and maintenance expenses to manage and operate a system such as that. And so it, long-term is keeping those water rates more affordable. And so, when we initially started talking with each of the cities, worked to communicate with the counties, and we got to a point in time where Norman County was generous enough to contract with Flaherty and Hood to move forward with the district formation process. Being that we have interest from Georgetown and Felton in basically what they've said is that they want the opportunity to be part of the rural water district. We would also like to make sure that we incorporate this portion of Clay County in the original boundary description as well. So before I turn that part over, or the, more the description of the resolution over to Daniel, I would just ask if there was any questions that I could help clarify.
Thank you. In reference to the Clay County City letters of support that you received, was there any discussion of potential financial implications down the road, or is that was just your initial step forward for continuing conversation?
One, that was our initial step forward to be able to include them in conversations such as this. As far as the financial requirements or burden or anything like that goes into the future, one of the very immediate next steps after the district is actually formed would be to complete a preliminary engineering report, which essentially outlines the alternatives for how each community would get water, what the quality of that water would be, and what the ultimate cost would be to the end user. And so looking at different alternatives, we're then able to also apply for funding at the state and federal level. And so it is challenging because it is an idea form, because we don't have the authority to write a preliminary engineering report like that because there's no governing body for the district yet.
Okay. Questions? Any questions before they move forward? We're still pondering. Do you want to continue with your, maybe? No? Yes? Okay.
Well, I guess.
Commissioner Campbell.
In terms of establishing a multi-county public water system, and I think that's the ask here and a step in the process. But what is the process once complete when you have a multi-county group that have formed this district, if you, for lack of a better term? What is the process in place in terms of implementation, and how does that work if you have two counties want to do something, one county has concerns? What is that process? And I'm going to give you an example of a project that might occur in a watershed district. And in a watershed district, we have multiple counties that can be part of a watershed district. And when it comes to implementing a project, what it takes is, in most instances, is a simple majority to move forward. And you can have that simple majority that could be from all outside of the county that has the concerns. And, so I guess I'm wondering about how that process in an organization like this would happen, and what is the representation that would be proposed in an organization like this. Those are all things that I think they're certainly important to me in wanting to make sure that there's protections on behalf of the land in Clay County that would be part of this district.
Certainly, and Commissioner, maybe I can answer your question and provide just a little bit more background on the process and kind of the structure here. Again, my name is Daniel Marks. I am an attorney with Flaherty and Hood in St. Paul, and kind of specialize in working with public utilities around the state. And your questions are right on point. I just want to take a step back and maybe just provide a little bit more context about where we're at in the process right now and what the process looks like going forward, and then I'll answer your questions specifically. So right now, we're at the very beginning stages where Norman County has adopted a resolution essentially to do two things. One, to form a rural water district under Minnesota Statutes 116A, and then two, commence the proceedings to establish a public water system, which would then if approved, would be governed by the rural water district. And what that looks like under this statute, because it is potentially going to be a multi-county system, we actually need judicial oversight in the process. And so the district court in the 9th Judicial District would actually oversee a public process that would include the development of an engineering survey, cost estimates, public hearings before the actual public water system could be established. And so we are at the very early stages, and really what we're seeking now is just authorization to begin the public process to actually establish the system, to form a preliminary legal entity, the water district itself, and then begin the process to establish the system. So that is a very high-level summary, kind of where we're at in the process. The process is fairly complicated. Nobody has really used this process or created a new public rural water district for several years, and so there's not a lot of guidance or templates out there. And so we're kind of working through it as we go along in terms of the process, and there will be a bit of a back and forth with the district court because they have a role to play in the formation process. So that's what just some background I wanted to give in terms of, how things will be run if and when this district gets final approval and the public water system gets approval by the district court, etc. Is the water district will have a board of commissioners, and those board of commissioners will be appointed by each county, and that the water district will then itself essentially be a governing entity for, govern itself under the powers and authority given to it in the statute, Minnesota Chapters 116 A01. And so that board will then have the authority to approve projects, potentially, if necessary, assess properties within the district, and all of that decision-making authority will be in that water district board itself, which the commissioners of which are appointed by the 3 counties. And Sarah, my recollection is that the statute allows for, I think, a maximum of 9 commissioners, but I think we were shooting to maybe have 7 commissioners. Is that correct?
That's
and
correct.
They would be appointed to that board by the counties on I believe it's a per capita population ratio that would establish that. And the idea here is that once the district is formed, nobody anywhere would be required to take advantage of its service. So nobody in Polk or Clay County would be required to take advantage of those district services, but individual cities, townships, etc. within the counties would be able to contract with the district, and the district would essentially become a service provider and tapping into additional infrastructure, etc. So I think that's the concept there. I will stop talking for a moment, and hopefully that started to answer your question, and if there's other questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think ultimately it sounds very similar to an establishment of a watershed district. I think the intent is by law is for it to work very similar to that. And again, my concern, and I just want to point out that some of us commissioners were just recently at an annual or semi-annual township officers meeting, and we brought this question up regarding these rural water systems, in particular this one, and that probably pertains more to northern Clay County, and and none of them had really heard anything about it. And I have a little bit of concern about how far we're going to be moving forward on this and how quickly we would move forward on this when the people who are up there and would either benefit or have potentially be impacted by it, what, how much knowledge do they have on it, and where is going to be the participation on their part. And ultimately, the governance that you just talked about, and thank you for the explanation, by the way, ultimately, if it's a seven-member panel, and based on how it's set up, and Clay County has a minority of that 7 members, does that group then still have the ability to implement the project within the boundaries of Clay County and have the assessing authority on them, even though there might be opposition on the part of the county for that? Those are issues that we all need to be thinking about and have some of those questions answered before we can. I know that's further down the road, as you said, but I know that this is more of an information gathering piece right now. But I think for now you've answered my questions. Thank you.
Yeah,
Commissioner.
Sorry, just to reiterate, and I thank you. I think you're thinking about this exactly the right way and asking the right questions. I think the process contemplated by statute essentially would make the district court the convener of the public process. There would be 2 engineering reports required, 2 public hearings required, and so there would be a lot of opportunity for public input in terms of the formation, the scope, the costs, etc. And again, this is in the preliminary stages. So I will pass to Sarah if she had something else she wanted to add.
Yeah, commissioners, I did want to add on, the comment of, people not having heard about this or things like that. Over the last year and a half, a little bit more than that, I personally have visited every single community, multiple city council meetings for each of those cities down Highway 75. I have only been to Felton the one time, but it was a shorter discussion. And so the other thing that we have done to give people an opportunity to learn about this, and this is just something that AE2S had done as an educational outreach thing, and basically to get input on the, is there more people who desire a regional water system and could see its value versus not? And if the answer is yes, then let's pursue what we're pursuing right now. And so we've held multiple public information meetings where we sent out, mass mailers, also advertised it in local publications, and our turnouts for those meetings, we'd get 40 or 50 people. And so, I guess I just described those things because we have made attempts to inform as many people as we can while knowing that we have no promises that we can make, and we don't have an official water district yet. So if that's helpful information at all.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Kaylee has a question.
Commissioner Campbell addressed it already.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh,
All right, questions? I just have a question on the map that was presented on the water district service to Minnesota. Earlier in your presentation, you'd mentioned the arsenic detection. Has that same test been conducted in Clay County? I'm not seeing any Clay County arsenic detection.
Are you looking at my PowerPoint from back in January, or?
I have, yes, in the ARPA funding request PowerPoint.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was what was provided to the county board. If you need clarification, it's the maps of the 3 counties with the proposed pipeline and the potential rural project beneficiaries in all of the 3 counties. And there's several marks in Norman County and some in Polk in regards to where the arsenic has been detected. Has there been any arsenic detection in the Clay County area?
Sure. The way that those tests were conducted was, again, A2S and a neighboring water district partnering up and driving around the countryside in the winter months to ask people if they would be open to us testing their water. And so we ran all of our in-house tests with the sample of people that said yes at the time. And on the map, you see the ones that have the arsenic contamination over the limit. So being that there's not any in Clay County doesn't mean that I wouldn't say yes or no, that arsenic contamination is an issue. I do want to clarify, though, that information you're looking at right now is very much from back in January. And today, the 3 of us are joining you today with the primary purpose of discussing the state statute and the process.
Right.
Where, when you see these pipelines on the map and the potential beneficiaries, all of that information was something that we had developed so that we could go out and help people visualize what this could look like.
Yes, I appreciate that. Commissioner Campbell and I are the commissioners that serve on that ARPA committee, and I think in allowing the full board a little more visual understanding of what the vision is, that's why it was included in the packet for today.
Sure.
Any questions from the board?
I guess I'm curious as to just what is the ask today? What in your presentation, I know you're looking to move forward in some ways, but what is the ask today of us?
I think I'll take a stab at that, Commissioner Campbell. I think today was intended more as an information session because, as we mentioned, the Norman County Board was prepared to move forward with the resolution. We realized that you may have more questions and more concerns that you would need answered before you might be ready to move forward with the resolution. So I guess maybe my question would be, what additional things can we provide so that the board might be ready to consider passing a similar resolution to what Norman considered, or are you in a position where you're feeling comfortable considering a resolution like that?
Well, my short answer to am I ready to consider it? The short answer is no, based on the concerns that I've expressed today. But I don't want to impede on progress either. But so I think it was kind of a real eye opener to me. And this is no offense to the comments that were made about doing presentations and mailings and things, and doing presentations in Felton and maybe Georgetown. But I think at grassroots government, there's nothing more grassroots than at the township level, and the township officers really, I think they have a pretty clear understanding of their neighbors and what their needs are, and this hasn't even been on the radar screen in any township officers meetings in terms of a topic of discussion, and it seems to me that for this to really be financially viable, you're probably gonna need to tap into rural residents for this to really make sense. And it seems to me that there's not an awful lot of knowledge out there. And Keith, I know I've worked with you on many things in the past, and I know you do your homework. And I really think that there needs to be there just needs to be some more effort in terms of reaching out to some of those rural townships too, and explaining what's going on here. I mean, it was just like, when we brought this up, it was, what is it? You know, and so if, I don't know what can be done there. I don't know if you could do a presentation at a planning commission meeting or something even that could, you know.
I might have a suggestion to that. I agree. And we have a township officer here in the audience today, and Ezra, I really feel like you're the pulse of what you're hearing. And I think if we were hearing concerns about water accessibility, we likely it would have bubbled to us. Not saying that it's not an issue now, but in terms of the whole area that this could encompass, would it be appropriate to hold public meetings, one in Polk, one in Norman, one in Clay, to invite folks to come in and give the presentation that you're giving to us? Because agreed, if I'm not hearing from my residents in Georgetown and Felton as well that we've got an issue, then I'm not sure the priority's there. But if we have public meetings to kind of pitch the scope, and all of a sudden we hear, yeah, this is kind of an issue, and we are concerned with some of the tests that we're getting, then maybe that would just help us move forward.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Keith.
Those comments very, very helpful for us in mapping out our way forward. And as far as timing, we don't have our back against any wall or anything like that. So certainly we don't want to put the cart in front of the horse and move ahead if there's not very strong local public support for the effort.
And I might also say another item that might be helpful is through the Basin Commission. We have a Minnesota Joint Powers Board that meets quarterly, I believe, at the offices in Fargo. And this is the type of presentation. We have commissioners from all of these counties on that board, and that would be a good presentation to give there.
Absolutely. I absolutely appreciate the suggestions and comments, commissioners, on, spreading the word a little bit more. I would just like to bring that into a little bit of perspective in that, I guess one thing is that we absolutely have done that and maybe just not reached enough people. But this is something that truthfully I've done on a volunteer basis, and because it's not something that has, there's 50 rural water districts between North Dakota, Minnesota, and South Dakota. And so it is something new to form a new one. And like I said, I've been doing this outreach on behalf of the communities and individual people who have shown their concerns. We understand the long-term water supply issues, the cost associated with that, the health concerns. And so while it is absolutely my fault that I haven't gotten to every single township, I just want to bring perspective to that it's a unique thing because there is not a governing body there's no name attached to it. It's a person, and it's really just me and the cities that support this doing as much as we can to get the word out. But Senator Eakin and Representative Marquardt did take this idea and they did draft it into a general obligation bond bill back in January. So we do have, legislative support. We've submitted information to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to the PFA, all of these different funding agencies. And our biggest roadblock is that there's not a governing body to continue discussing the idea. So nobody has authority to say that this is feasible or not feasible because there's nobody in charge. It's just a a young engineer running around the countryside informing people of that, yes, this is feasible, and understanding each other's, issues and concerns with water, and how, we've got a lot of people that have to work together to make something like this affordable and feasible.
And just to, if I may, to kind of follow up on the question is, what is the ask? I think eventually what we would like is for the county board to pass a similar authorization to what Norman County did, which functionally does two things. It says that Clay County would like to authorize the formation and be a part of the governing structure of the water district itself, so that you then have, a say in the legal entity of that district. And then two, you are supportive and authorizing the initiation of the public process through the district court to further evaluate that district and the public water system, and authorize all of the engineering and the public hearing process to move it forward further to inform and engage the public going forward. So I think that's eventually what the ask will be, to kick that off for purposes of clarity.
So,
and I'm more than happy to interface as Norman County is my client, but on the direction of Norman County and requests of Clay County staff or Clay County attorney, I'm more than happy to interface to answer any additional legal questions or provide information that could help facilitate that process moving forward.
So I think today, in reading the room and the comments, the board is curious and willing to listen to our rural residents and cities on what that need is, in whatever the scope and capacity of those conversations in the upcoming months are. Certainly, if you want to host a meeting here, we have no problem doing that. We can help publicize that to allow you to hear and allow us to hear from them. We're not saying no, but there are some really big questions in regard to need and future cost down the road. I think we understand the statute requirements and the representation and the eventual assessment components. We get that, but I think today, unless anyone else says anything different, we're willing to continue conversations short of adopting a resolution today. Accurate?
Accurate.
Is that clear as mud or helpful, Keith, in moving forward?
Madam Chair, that's very helpful. That's just what we needed, so. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you all again. Keith, maybe we can, or if you're going to the AMC conference, we can discuss further if any questions arise before that time. Any other?
I look forward to seeing you there.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation today.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 9 today is committee reports. Commissioner Ebbinger, would you like to start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I didn't have any meetings this week.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Campbell?
Yeah, thank you. With the holiday, the only meeting I had was yesterday, and that was on the Clay County Substance Use Crisis Center, and I got a real briefing on B3, and I could call it something else, but it won't. It'll start with B. Anyway, I think there's an awful lot that's involved here that I shared my concern yesterday in that meeting regarding the requirements of the B3 that were not included in the original design costs and those things that we talked about. You know, just just the fact that, you know, is it a requirement to go the geothermal? And if it is, that's like $500,000 added to the project, just all by itself. And there was an awful lot of other issues in there. Right now, is there even our holding pond that we had made twice the size that we needed to help cover this building, and now there's a suggestion that we might have to have a separate holding pond or some whole system for runoff water. But I mean, these are things that obviously there's a lot of them that we went through quite a list, and there's some of them that we're going to dispute, that we don't think is necessary. But it's this $14 million project, I think, just became a lot more expensive.
And I think to that, I'm not sure if you're done with your reports, I think to that, last year we took a stand in advocating at the state level late in the game because we had received kind of our preliminary estimates about how much more that was going to cost. Certainly feel like we need to have discussions this week. I know Commissioner Cayley, you're on Health and Human Services Committee, but this practice of the state legislature allocating, or state legislature and Department of Human Services and other agencies awarding grants based on what estimates were, and then to find out the strings attached that weren't in the initial proposal could be upwards of another $2 to $3 million on these projects. It just, it's a hardship for communities that really are taking a big ask to build, only to find out late in the game that these additional requirements are going to cost upwards of millions of dollars. And I think the retention component is one of them. We were really clear in building this new transfer station, which, by the way, those plans are less than 3 years old, and we had gone above and beyond to mitigate water and to take into account that resource, only to find out that it's not appropriate because it doesn't fit in with the box. It's classic government, really, but that's a whole nother soapbox. But you know, I think we do need to have conversations about the additional financial component that was the unknown.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the list was just incredibly long, and even got down to how furniture is made. I mean, and the requirements within furniture itself. You know, some are make sense and some do not. There is another issue about lighting in the place, and right now there's a significant part of that building. Now we have you know, and Frank, you were involved with it, and all the bedrooms were purposely put on the outside so they had to have the window lighting. And now they're talking about, according to this B3, that the day rooms that are inside still have to have outside light. So there's only one way left to do that, and that's to do it for skylights. And, you know, I don't know, you know, to me, it seems to me that the same people that go into the day room have the ability to go into their bedroom whenever they want and get their light that they need. And so this could add an incredibly amount of cost. Now, we did agree in looking at this, both Troy and Kathy, that the nursing stations that are held internally, the big areas there, and they're working there a lot, that a skylight might be appropriate there. If you've done the tour of the resource center, you'll see that we did some skylights in some of those internal offices for that reason, for those people that are there. But there's an awful lot of stuff here that overkill is an understatement in what they want to do. So B3 is.
Again, and I think that for people watching, we want to make sure that this is the most efficient possible. That makes sense in the long run, and this board is committed to that. But there's just some, you know, inefficiencies that, yes, skylights are important, but we're talking about efficiency of heating a building, but we want to add all these skylights, which reduce the efficiency. I mean, it just is counterproductive, and we can't have turf grass, but we have to mitigate the water by watering the non-turf grass. I mean, come on, let's have some confidence here.
in talking with Joe, skylights, there's one thing about skylights, they ultimately leak and they, so it's just all these extra things that are, so hopefully, so to end my report on that, and it was a little over a 3-hour meeting, and it was a very eye-opening to me. I do think that we've established which of these B3 makes sense to us and which of them don't. I think the bigger ones where we don't agree, but so we'll continue to work on that. And then I asked the question towards the end of the meeting about, okay, if all these B3 issues are implemented and we're required to do them, what cost did that add to this project? For example, if it's $1 million, that $5 million grant we got just basically got reduced by 20% for things that we weren't expecting to have. So, so it's significant, and that comes into play as far as I'm concerned, and as far as all of us at this table are concerned. The name of Kent Deacon and Margaret were brought up, legislators who did really good things on our behalf, but we're going to have some work to do with our legislatures moving forward on this, because the amount that they put in for grants, if they want to give you a grant to cover these things, it's one thing, but those weren't included in the original process. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Gross?
I had no meetings either, but I do want to comment on this water district thing. I'm planning, we got to contact Georgetown and Felton. I go to their meetings, and I know about year and a half ago, I went to a Felton meeting, and the residents brought in samples of their water, and I wouldn't wash in that water at all. More or less than drink it. But so I think I'm going to go back to our meeting in Felton and Georgetown and find out, are those towns interested in this? If they are, then I guess we got to get involved in this, supplying water to them, but I'll find out more, I guess. I'll attend try and get to their next meetings.
Thank you.
So, but that's it for my.
Thank you, Commissioner Gross. Commissioner Kaylee?
No meetings to report, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yesterday, I attended the Lakeland Mental Health Facility meeting. We did have a long discussion on the finance. They had individual meetings with all but one of the counties, but were able to meet with Clay County. We did discuss the proposed 23 budget. They really are holding the line on what the no new request is. It's been that way for about 4 years, so I think Rhonda is aware that there might be a nominal increase going forward. Access to the centers continue to look good, a shorter wait than we've seen in the past few years. Staffing is continuing to be an issue. I know this board had sent a letter of support to the governor's office in regards to dual licensure and the holdups that we are seeing between the two states. That is a huge issue for Lakeland as well. So we are sending a letter of support to help ease some of the timelines of those requirements to the state and also the mental health center associations. And then talked about the 401 contributions. We did approve that, and then did approve the annual 990 from 21. And then I also attended virtually the meeting that Commissioner Campbell reported on. Sorry if it's a little of a soapbox, but it is concerning. I think when we get in those meetings, we have to remember the purpose of the need. And the need, reason we're building that is to really to help deal with the substance use crisis that is in our community right now. And yes, there are B3 components into what that facility looks like and how we'll need to implement that. But we're at a critical structure or in a juncture with crisis in substance use in our area. And so the quicker we can get these issues mitigated and continue with our build in the spring, the better. Steve?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I limited meetings. I did participate in the substance use facility. Just to, I think for the other commissioners not on that committee, understanding we do have a B3, we have B3, a team that essentially works with these type of projects, and so they are looking at those exceptions to some of the things that were brought forward by the commissioners in hopes that we'll be able to not do some of those. We'll have a good idea, I think, of what we heard yesterday is that by December, we'll have received answers and then also what those costs would be of what we would have to do. And so those will be coming before this board at that time. Also participated yesterday in a meeting with Matt Jacobson in regards of our land development code. Currently, our code is a 2012, and we need to by statute to have it relooked at every 15 years, and so we're talking about some potential ways to look at that. And also would just note that. We do not have a board meeting next Tuesday. This board will be at the annual AMC conference in Minneapolis from Sunday through midday Wednesday. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Our next item is a closed session.
Move to close.
Motion.
For agenda item.
A motion to close from Commissioner Campbell.
Second.
A second from Commissioner Gross. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Carried. Thanks, Ezra. Okay, we are back in session. We had a motion to reopen to reopen the session from Gross and Kaylee, and that was voted on unanimously. Anything else? We are adjourned.